next two speakers don't need any introduction. I think you're going up together. And we at the VALUEx conference that I do in Closters, we have a non-solicitation policy, which means that you can't show up and sell something. But when they're done, I'm going to actually sell Mike O'Brien's photography because I'm allowed to do it. And as you can see, William is not really interested in my introduction because you can just go ahead without me. William's book was just rated #1 on Goodreads in a way that was really unbiased, and I think that his book deserves to be there. I just want William to. He does incredible preparation on the podcast, as you know. He recently interviewed Brian Lawrence. I want William to write another book, but maybe he'll do that. And I want to visit Mike. Yeah, do you see it? Round of applause for William's book.
That's just because he knows how much it hurts me to write a book.
I also want a round of applause for Mike O'Brien's amazing portraits of two incredible people. So.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here. And I'm kind of on a high because everywhere I turn, I've been seeing friends, and it's just really lovely. And, you know, we're really here because of a friendship that started between Buffett and Munger in 1959 and built this company with, what, a market value of $865 billion. And I'm here because of my friendship with Guy, which goes back 25, 30 years, and my friendship with Michael, which goes back to us working on the Great Minds of Investing together. And it's just such a delight. And it just makes me think of, you know, when I asked Munger, when I was working on Richer, Wiser, Happier, and I said to him, I asked him about what makes for a happy life, and he immediately started talking about relationships. And as he would often say, he said, you know, we have a very simple strategy. He said, you know, if you want to have a good partner, be a good partner. And I started to think, oh, well, so I should actually try to be a better friend, because if I want to have good friends, I should be a better friend. And so it's just a delight to be here with Michael, who is the best partner on the Great Minds of Investing. And I wanted to start by asking him about this photograph, which is the single greatest portrait of Munger that was ever taken. And last year, as you'll remember, those of you who are lucky enough to be here, we talked about his portrait of Buffett that's now in the Smithsonian Permanent Collection, and is the single greatest portrait of Buffett that I've ever seen. So tell me, what was it like when you were preparing actually to take this photograph? Because you had been coming to Omaha for many years, and you knew that he was kind of a fearsome character in terms of his reputation.
I was petrified. This was one of my heroes, both Mr. Buffett and Mr. Munger. And the producer of the Great Minds of Investing, Hendrik Lieber, who's a German money manager, had this idea of documenting all the great value investing. And I was in Costco, appropriately, and I got a text message from Hendrik saying, oh my gosh, he had connected with Dorothy, and Mr. Munger had agreed to be photographed, but it would have to be a short 10-minute session. And I lost my composure because I was excited but petrified, scared, because Mr. Munger, I've seen him on stage for years, and he would, you know, if something seemed foolish to him, which I think photography could, he would cut it short. So I was thinking, how do I do this in 10 minutes and get a quality of portrait that can stand with the other portraits to be a good book? And so, I don't know, I had more fear and anxiety over photographing Charlie than any other picture I think I've done in my life. I didn't sleep the night before. I worried, if this happens, what do I do? And then when we arrived, I found not the persona I'd seen on stage, but a very almost grandfatherly, welcoming person. And the 10 or 15 minutes turned into almost an hour.
And tell us about the process, because it's a very unusual process. And even when we were preparing for this and we spoke a few weeks ago, you talked to me about the fact that taking a photograph of someone with glasses is a nightmare, and the fact that Warren also had glasses, and so you drew my attention to the light on the top left there. So tell us, what is your process, and how did he respond to it?
That was one of the reasons I was petrified, because I didn't know how my light would reflect on the glasses, and it has to get fine-tuned so that there's a highlight side and a shadow side. So, you know, it'd be 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was saying, well, at the octalight, if it goes into this much part of his glasses, I'll have him turn his head a little bit. Maybe there's natural light that I can also fall back on. So you think of all the things that could go wrong, and then you try to plan accordingly. And so by the time I'd done all my planning, it was 6 o'clock and time to get over there and start setting up for the picture. But, and once I saw that he was a gentler and more welcoming, almost like a grandfather, I think, I breathed a sigh of relief. And once I get into making the picture, I'm 1,000% focused.
And tell us what the photo actually captures of him, because I remember when I wrote about your process in an essay at the start of The Great Minds of Investing, you said it captures a part of his essence. It's not the whole story, but it captures a part of his essence. What do you see in the photo that you're trying to convey?
Well, I mean, I think this was such an icon in my world and so important. I wanted to make the best picture I was capable of in that time, so I didn't want to fail. And what I try to do, there's just silence, and I try to get the subject to connect 100% to the camera. And so no talking, just completely focus into the camera, the lighting. I look to see that the lighting is right, and then I take a number of pictures until I feel that we got the best one.
And you might take 200 or 300, right? I mean, you're like very
and change
intense.
the light from one side to the other side, and try to keep the person engaged so that he will say, "This is boring. I'm going to leave," you know.
So I see this kind of intensity to it. What else are you seeing in there? I mean, this sort of fierce focus, right? Like you see this as a smart guy, not the easiest man necessarily, but really smart.
Well, and intelligent in the force of his concentration. I think the lighting is, from my standards, works very, very nicely and quite beautiful. And
you said to me recently you think there's a vulnerable quality in the photo as well, which interested me.
Yeah. I think there's a human quality. And everybody will look at it and bring something that resides in themselves that they will see in the picture. And I never like to say it captures the person, because there's so many facets of, you know, he laughs, he smiles, he's serious, you know, but I wanted everybody focused in the portraits that we did for the Great Minds of Investing.
One thing that's striking about Michael's approach is he wouldn't let any of the subjects smile. And so they're all against the same kind of gray backdrop with this kind of severe lighting, and you're looking them in the eye. And so I feel like when I look at the photo of Buffett, because he'd been photographed so much, is better at hiding. It's more concealed. You kind of get a glimpse of him. But there's something very raw about it. There is a sort of softness and a vulnerability to it.
Well, I got out of there, and I was, when we finished, and we made a group portrait of Hendrik and his wife, Claudia, and Munger, and I got in too because I had an assistant. So I was wondering if I was documented. I'd actually met Charlie Munger, you know, and Charlie looked over and he said, "Oh, I like this. This is what we do at Berkshire. Take these group pictures."
He was more comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And tell us what a brilliant idea he thought the Great Minds of Investing was as a project that you devoted many years of your life to. What did he say when you told him?
He said, "That's a horrible idea." well, keep it to yourself. Don't tell anybody we're trying to put out a book. And but I got one aside. I'm going to detour. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
So, Monsoon, that was a great talk, and I had the pleasure for the last 2 years of riding with her dad, Monish, to the Berkshire meeting. We both live in Austin. I came with Elizabeth, my wife, and right before I was set to leave, I got this text, 2 or 3 days ago. Michael, if you want a really cheap flight that goes direct to Omaha, Allegiant Air, Monish. And I said, how much? He said, it's $100. I said, and it's direct? Oh, yeah, it's direct. So I get on the site and I look at $100. I grab it, a bag. You want to check a bag? Another $100. Do you want to carry on? It's another $100. And then the final thing is, do you want to breathe cabin air? $200. So I had the pleasure, you gave a wonderful talk, and I had the pleasure being with your dad, and I said, Monish, I've never seen anybody so popular as you. I said, you have so many followers on Twitter. He said, my followers has gone up from 50% from last year to this year. And I looked at it, I said, what? 2 million to 3 million. And I said, well, hold on, big guy. I have a Twitter account, and I've gone up 100% from 10 to 20.
Does anyone have a question before we scram? Because I know that we're only allotted a limited amount of time. Yeah.
So actually, William is so good at putting the spotlight on other people. And actually, you're kind of asking Michael the same kind of questions that you ask of yourself. And you wrote about Charlie in your book. Maybe you can share a little bit about your experience of encountering him. And this is my great frustration with William. Because he's so good. This is what smart people do. The bit of themselves that they want to hide, they hide. And they do it because we don't even realize that they're doing it. So I reflect back the same questions on you. What was it like for you to interview Charlie Munger? How did you feel about writing about him? How terrified were you?
Yeah, I was very intimidated. And so Dorothy, right? So Dorothy wrote me a message saying, Mr. Munger will give you a 10-minute interview before the Daily Journal meeting. And so I'm in this ridiculous position where I'm like, I picture this outside my kitchen at home, and I'm like doing this sort of victory dance. I'm like so excited to be flying 3,000 miles for 10 minutes with Charlie. And so I arrive an hour early for the meeting, and I'm waiting outside the lobby in the Daily Journal meeting, just on the off chance that it would end early. And it didn't. And people like Lee Lu and Monish and Francis Chu and Chris Davis sort of milling around, Francois Rochon, all these people who'd come to the Daily Journal meeting. And then I'm sort of finally admitted, and everyone's kind of pouring out of this, I guess it was a board meeting for the Daily Journal. And so one of the things that was striking for me is, in the moment where I actually get brought in for my interview, is about as unideal as could be imagined, because it's so noisy and so distracting with all of these people milling out and sort of talking as we go. And here's Charlie sitting in the middle of it, absolutely focused. And I thought that was the first really interesting insight, was to see, it reminded me of that image of Charlie that all of you know, we've heard of him as a book with two legs, and I always pictured him with kids sort of running around making noise and him being totally oblivious to all the noise. There's tremendous focus. And then I was so prepared. I mean, I'd spent weeks preparing because I needed...
Because that's what William does. He spends weeks obsessively preparing.
Yeah, I was pretty obsessed. And so And so I was very, very direct, and I went straight for what I in my own mind, I often think of the eye of the bullseye. And so when I was writing a chapter of my book, I would always think, what's the eye of the bullseye? Of all the things I need to share about this person, what's the real essence of it? And so that's why I ended up writing about how not to be a fool, which I think is one of the great contributions from Charlie, is this whole idea of how not to be a fool. And so that's really what the chapter became about. But again, like Michael, what surprised me was that there was this courtliness and a gentleness and a generosity and a kindness. And I tried to capture this in the chapter. At the end of the chapter, when I talked about how I ended up getting more time, more questions at the end because he stayed and chatted to the disciples for so long. And in the book, because I resisted being sentimental, I talked about the spirit of generosity and kindness, but actually sort of privately since then, what I've said is, no, what I was seeing was love. Like there was this love towards the disciples and a generosity of spirit that I thought was extraordinary. And I think that's one of the things that Michael is capturing in the photo is there's the toughness, there's the intensity, there's the ferocity, there's the focus, but there's also this kind of soft quality. And Monish once said to me that, he has a hard exterior that's protective, and that Warren has the same hard exterior, but underneath, Monish said he's a beautiful soul and a very a gentle and kind person. And so that I think is captured in the photo, it's captured in my interview, and I think it's probably why we're here. It's not just because he was so smart or so rich, it's because he was generous with his time and his wisdom and his insights.
Great answer. Thank you, William. You see if you push him. So we'll do one question from Brad, and then William, I want you to talk about how I'm going to buy a copy of this photograph and how others, if they want to. But go ahead, Brad.
So at that annual meeting at the Daily Journal, I was there. We talked beforehand. And I have
we
some
waited outside
pictures.
Together, right?
Yeah, we did. And he gave the annual meeting, and I have some pictures of Charlie in front and you off to the side.
Huh.
Charlie stayed for 3 hours afterwards for the 20 of us that were there. There were 400 people in the room, but he said, "You are crazy." But I wanted to ask you, in the after meeting, whenever it was gone, there's a few things that have stuck in my mind, but what stuck in your mind when the crowds are gone and Charlie's just there?
I mean, one of the things that was really memorable for me was I planted myself literally about 2 feet to his left, I guess. So I'm looking at him from the side, and there are all these disciples around from around the world. And at the end, after, I guess he'd been talking nonstop for 4 or 5 hours, and people wanted, there was a silence at one point, and he said something like, you guys will be okay. I mean, it's a difficult world, but you guys will be okay. And there was a sort of, it was like he wanted to give more. And then at the very end, he gets up and he had this big, as I remember it, this big kind of cane with a big sort of bulbous top. It looked like something that, you could attack someone with in Neolithic times. And I helped him down off the stage. And you just see this guy, sort of wizened, and he was kind of wasted, and he didn't fit in his suit anymore because it was so baggy, and he had these thick glasses, and he could barely see anything. And so I'm sort of helping him off the stage. It sounds self-aggrandizing to say it's me helping him. I just happened to be standing next to him. And so I helped him down, and I just thought, this kind of, it was the generosity of spirit. Like this guy, his body is just totally broken. And here he is spending 5 hours sharing, an hour in his meeting before our meeting, where he's chairman of the board for the Daily Journal, getting a grand total of, what was his pay? 0, to add to his 100,000 salary a year at Berkshire for the last 35 years. All right, and so when I ended that chapter and I said, today I've been in the presence of greatness, it was that spirit of generosity. It wasn't just the intelligence. And so there was a shift for me that you see in that chapter of going from tremendous respect for the fearsome intellect to this realization of, oh, here's this old curmudgeonly guy who has kind of changed, and he's become kind of gentle and generous and loving. Or maybe he was like that all along. I don't know. Dorothy would know infinitely better than me. Maybe I was projecting. But I found that very inspiring, the fact that there was this kindness and gentleness and warmth and generosity of spirit.
So Charlie had photos or busts of Lee Kuan Yew and of Ben Franklin. I have one bust and one photo, but it's not enough. How do I get the ultimate edition? Tell us all.
Yeah, so Michael is the world's least self-promoting human, which means that it falls upon me and Guy to promote him. And so the book itself came out about 9 years ago, thanks to Henrik Leber, and it was an incredible labor of love for him. I mean, I think he probably blew about $1 million on this book, and it sold 6,000 copies almost immediately at $75 a pop. Never went on sale. They all sold out. I have a few at home, and Michael has sold these kind of collector's editions. He very kindly ran to get me a couple of years ago in Omaha Airport and gave one to me, incredibly generous, that are just exquisite, that they have the book in them, but they're also in this beautiful handmade box, and they have this incredible print of Buffett or Munger in there that's really like made, I think, with kind of German paper and ink and the like, and it will survive generations. And so then there are people who will just buy one or two of the portraits, not the whole book, but one or two of the portraits that are exquisite, and will frame them. And I was very struck. I was thinking about this recently because Chris Davis, who's a friend of mine who's on the board of Berkshire, who I ran into this morning, said to me a few months back that Charlie told him very early on, put photos of people you admire in your office because they're people you don't want to disappoint. And so he said, I think he would have been surprised to see that I have a bust of him in my office, but that was inspired by seeing Ben Franklin's bust in Charlie's home. And so I think this idea of structuring your physical environment so you have pictures of people you admire is a really good hack. It's tilting the odds of you behaving decently. And so what better thing to do than to buy Michael O'Brien's portrait of Munger next to his extraordinary portrait of Buffett, which is very similar for the great minds of investing, but then for the real prize, the trifecta, I think you should also try to get the great photo that he did that was on the cover of Roger Lowenstein's book that we talked about last year, which is the one where he coaxed Buffett onto the roof, and Buffett is on the roof looking pissed. And he's like, why am I on the roof of my building on a crappy gray day in Omaha? So I would encourage all of you to buy all three photos.
Well, I'm going to be doing it. I think we need to leave Michael the last word, Michael. Poor Michael's been talked about so long.
No. Thank you, William. Thank you, Guy. I feel like this was an infomercial, but...
Yeah, you can also get a dishwasher as part of the deal.
No, I love making. I make the prints. They're fine art prints on archival paper with beautiful pigment inks, and they look lovely in the book, but it's nothing like the tonality and looking at the pure aesthetic values in the picture. Anyway, y'all been a great audience.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Thank you. Thank you.